Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. Our guest today, Monte Schulz, published his first novel, Down by the River, back in 1990. Spent the next 12 years writing a novel about the Jazz Age. He is a Renaissance man of sorts, a composer, songwriter, and producer whose most recent album is titled Seraphonium. In 2010, he became the owner of the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. He calls himself endlessly curious, which is a wonderful attribute for a writer. He is well versed in world history and theology, fascinated by the style and use of innovative language, and can be caught engaging in provocative philosophical conversations about big, far reaching imaginative ideas and worldly perspectives. He has an MA in American Studies from UC Santa Barbara, and he grew up in a creative household as the son of the beloved late Peanuts cartoonist Charles M. Schulz. His latest book, Millennium, published in late August. I'm very pleased to welcome Monte Schulz.
It's Metropolis.
What did
Metropolis,
I?
yeah.
I said Millennium. Why did I do that?
I don't
Okay.
know.
Some days I just read a book called Millennium. It is Metropolis, and not Superman's Metropolis, though. Not at all.
No.
So, in fact, given that, let's get you to read the intro to that to get people used to how wonderful your writing is.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, where did I put it? Even now I dream of the airships, emerging from those gray clouds at sunset like dark fingers of God on a copper sky above the holy river Livorno. I can hear distant cathedral bells announcing jubilee across the marrying districts of the metropolis, see myriad flocks of pigeons rising from the dome of eternity above the tumult and cheer where a grand civilization gathered to worship its glorious victory over a race of beasts and the end of war. What fools we were, and deceivers too, ignorant not just of our misdeeds, but of our abysmal lack of virtue. Dishonor belonged to each of us without distinction, yet who was willing to concede this guilt? Not one among us, and that is a bitter truth. 60 years of slaughter and mayhem, millions eradicated, history itself diverted from a soaring enlightenment to degradation and shame, both the corrupt and the innocent swallowed up by darkness and death, and the arrival of the giant airship simply an unexpected denouement to the sorriest of narratives. But I don't intend this to be another morbid tale of war and sorrow. What would be the point of it? We've known abject misery for more than a century now, and surely nobody needs to be reminded. No, I simply refuse to wallow any longer in gloom and nightmares. Rather, I have a love story to tell, a beautiful love story that begins one evening on a cold, blustery beach far from the great metropolis.
See, that is the kind of opening that draws people in and says, oh my God, what's going on here? So many interesting bits and pieces in there. And of course, that's your job as a writer, is to hook us from the very beginning, says what happens next. And that's the fascinating part. Were you always going to be a writer?
No, I liked sports. I liked the baseball player when I was younger. Then I played hockey. And I went to college for hockey, not writing, and ended up leaving as beginning to be a songwriter and being interested in writing very early on. But I played hockey till just maybe about 12 years ago. I don't know. I guess my interests, I would have to say sports and history when I was younger, and then foreign languages. And then so writing came later.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've written in several different genres. Was there a particular event or series of events that led you to write this alternate history novel?
Well, it's just an extension of what I wanted to write. The other novels, literary novels, first one was a crime novel set in a small town. I studied small town America in graduate school and read small town novels. And then Crossing Eden was my idea of following through on the notion of the great American novel. So from reading Thomas Wolfe and Carl Sandburg and John Steinbeck and William Faulkner, John Dos Passos, I wanted to write something big. And then I wrote a crime novel based on a true murder case in San Francisco, and that's sort of a period piece because it's sort of crime noir from the late 50s, sort of a crime noir novel. And then after that, I wanted to write a book that had a really big background, so a war novel, but a love story, a study on the idea of eugenics, and a society in collapse, and a college novel. It's also a college novel. It's a college novel. It's a mystery novel. It's a war novel. It's an adventure novel. It's fun.
It is that, and it's filled with multiple themes all the way through. When I was started to categorize like you just did, I said, well, Yeah, it's a love. It's also a coming of age novel because he's a
Right,
college student.
right.
And it features Da Vinci Code level set of interlocking puzzles and philosophical concept, the clash of civilization and the ugly use of eugenics. So I guess what I'm wondering is when your readers close the book, what do you hope they take away with them?
I think one thing I would hope, okay, two, the idea of hope and the idea that, what does it say? Something near the very end, he says, Julian talks about how, let me find it really quickly. He says that, let's see about hope. Yeah, that the victory of all peoples who refuse to deny that life is solely concerned with love. And so I want people to understand that idea that there's always hope as long as we treat with the idea of love, that we have to love each other. Simultaneously, I hope they take away from the idea that, where a civilization can go dark,
Hmm.
which has happened several times. It happened obviously in Germany,
Hmm.
and it could happen here. I always feel we teeter on the brink of it. We almost fell in that direction in the 30s before World War II sort of
Yeah.
bailed us out.
Hmm.
Um, which is why Sinclair Lewis wrote that book. It can't happen here, right?
Yeah.
And then we've had this issue currently, in the Trumpists and all this sort of thing. Where we could go, because I
Yeah.
do believe that in our society in America there are people, there are a faction of people who don't really believe in democracy, don't believe in the republic, and actually would favor an authoritarian regime as long as it's their regime.
Yeah.
And so Metropolis also shows what happens when you start targeting the people you don't like. Because
Hmm.
as Mr. Sutros says, explaining eugenics, it's just about people you hate,
Hmm.
nothing more. And I
Yeah.
think I think that's sort of the idea. So that's what those two things. One, where a society could go, the collapse of a society, falling into darkness, and then also that there is that love and hope are the way out.
Yeah. So many fascinating details and in this book. One of the things I really appreciate is the dialogue between your protagonist Julian Bream and his puzzle solving but uh, bourbon loving roommate Freddie Barron. That feels so real because that's the way we used to do it 50 years ago when I was in college.
Right. I like it's kind of funny because so you actually read that you read the whole book. Did you read
Oh,
the book?
I have to. Yeah. Yeah, that's my
I'm
job.
impressed because I think you're the third person done an interview with who's actually read the whole book. And I told somebody the other day that it does make a difference. I can do an interview if the person hasn't read the book, but if they've read the
Mhm.
book, they ask me questions that are unexpected. And this is a really good one because one of the parts that I tell people is it's a college novel, and there are a lot of things about college in there, but they're sort of like they're sort of glossed over and everything else that's happening. But I like that exchange between them. Freddie calls him thank you, master. And Julian, thank you, mother, for advising me this. They're different, but they're similar. Freddie has his strengths. Yeah, he's an alcoholic, but he's a puzzle genius.
Yeah,
And as I said, neither of them would survive without the other in this book.
exactly.
So,
When I read for my interviews, and I've done over 800 of them, I take detailed notes. This book took me a long time to read because I wanted to take a note on every other page. It is so dense in the best possible sense with ideas, concepts, bits and pieces. So, congratulations for that.
thank you. I appreciate it because it is. I'll tell you that I wrote the book. Um, I wrote it in 9 months. I wrote 50 pages of it 16, 17 years ago, but then I wrote the rest of it, the other 600 pages in 9 months, writing at least one page every morning before I had anything to eat or drink. I zoomed through it. I had no outline. I literally, since you read the book, you can appreciate this. It's sort of astonishing. I literally made the whole book up as I was writing it. So, for instance,
It's
when
amazing.
Julian meets Priscilla Draxler,
Hmm.
he comes up, knocks on the door, and he goes in and says, "Hello, Julian. I'm." As she said, "I'm," and introduced herself, Priscilla Draxler, she was introducing herself to me. I didn't know she was Priscilla Draxler until I typed it, and it wasn't until about a couple months later I really realized the connection between herself and Peter Draxler, how he was a painter and she's a painter.
Yes.
I didn't think that when I
Really?
She was
Wow.
just a painter. I was up at the top of that tower. She was
Yeah.
just an artist, and I didn't know who she was till she introduced herself. So it is a very. But when I read the book now, I guess what I was going to say is, when I read it now, I see a lot of connections, a lot of details that appeared, but were not rendered consciously. Without with an outline and planning it and
Right.
symbolism. And, a friend of mine read the book and he asked me, "So what is the symbol? What is the meaning of that chasm?" I said, "An earthquake created a chasm." That was the
Yeah.
meaning
Right.
of it. All right. There's
Yeah.
no. I said. I told this friend. I said, you're mistaken to think that novels are full of deliberate symbolism. It's
Mhm.
not really work like that. They're just the connections appear. You see them, and there are a lot of connections in Metropolis. Again, many things I've seen since I wrote the book.
Well,
It all hangs together surprisingly for some reason. I don't know
you have a
why.
very good subconscious working for you. I think that's
Thank you.
part of.
I think I have the muses whispering in my ear. I did them for 9 months. They gave me everything.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm kind of curious about this is obviously a society that shares some past with ours because you mentioned such things as Pompeii and Herculaneum
right,
and
right.
so I'm curious where it divulges or diverts from our shared past to their own timeline, as it were.
Right. That's a really good question because the reason why, I said I started this book probably 18, 19 years ago. Now, I think as I started picking up in 2016 or 2019, I saw a computer file on this that said 2003. I was really shocked. That long ago, 16 years ago? Well, I stopped writing the book because I couldn't figure out how Julian could be studying the Greeks and the Romans in a fictional republic. And then I couldn't figure out the geography of the whole thing. What's it going to look like? Where is it? And then I realized that the republic is France. The metropolis is Paris. The Holy River Livorno would be the Seine. And then the eastern provinces would be Germany and Eastern Europe. But to answer your question, I described the book to a friend of mine, a professor east of Santa Barbara, and described the whole book as I was writing it, right? And he said, it's as though history bifurcated about 1,500 years ago.
Mhm.
And so it creating this society that's similar to ours, as it would be, but different. So they have, for instance, radio vision, they have radioactive rockets, but they don't have airplanes.
Right.
They have their machine guns are called mechanical rifles. Okay, there's one a vacuum cleaner in the book is called a motor dust inhaler, right? Because why not, right?
You have a
Um,
lot of fun with that, by the way, all through the book.
yeah, yeah. I didn't, but here's another thing. Um, I didn't want to go over the top and rename everything. My publisher
Mm.
said he likes books that are similar to us. These dystopian or kind of imaginary novels, imaginative novels. There's a science fiction writer, David Brin, who, when I described the book to him, he said, "No, I like my world to be completely different." I think he read the first chapter. He said it
Uh,
sounds like Fitzgerald. So your writing is great, but it's just too similar to ours. Okay, well, I did not want to rename everything. I
mhm.
didn't. I renamed all the cars are different, which would make
Yes.
sense. I gave some thought to that. It would make sense. It would be a Ford and Chevrolet. It wouldn't.
Yeah.
But a lot of the food is the same. Some is different.
Mhm.
So you've read it. So wouldn't you say that maybe about 10% of the things are different from us? Just about 10%, I think. I
Yeah.
think it. Yeah, I would say that. How he names things, stores are called the same. So it has an air of familiarity. The classes Julian takes and Freddie are kind of interesting. Lunar considerations in jurisprudence or something like that is a
Yeah.
weird class.
It's
Some
it's
strange things.
yeah. There are a lot of mix-ups with two different concepts in the same class,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is a different kind of thinking. So it was perfectly fit in there. I also love the fact that people who are really good writers send me to Googling stuff all the time. And I don't know how many times I did that for you because you're so good, I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And sometimes I would find something really repurposed. And I have to look up this one because I can't pronounce it that well. It was a food that you had toward the end of the book, and you used the term. Let's see, I've got it right here. Jujak, an exotic stew of sorts.
Oh,
I,
Izuzak.
I,
Izuzak.
I looked it up. And there's a small town in Morocco by that name.
So I'm guessing. Okay, all right. Then I can tell you that's pretty smart of you because I'll tell you where I got the name probably
Uh-huh.
from a collection of stories by Paul Bowles. Okay,
Okay.
and so I got some of the names of. So there is no question that's where I got that name. Okay, no question. That's it. Wouldn't make where I couldn't make that one up.
Yeah.
Some of the names like that woman who comes and averts an assassination at Freddie's house. Right,
Hmm.
her name is spelled. It looks like Beroe with umlaut over the e,
Yes.
and that name it looks like it's Beroe. Its name is actually pronounced Veroe. The B,
Oh.
it's a Greek name, and it's pronounced. The B is pronounced like a V.
Ah.
That woman who they said Julian asked when they're in the Undercity with the near the Cassandras Hippodrome, he asked who arranged all. I mean, who planned all this? And Marco tells him Lecumnia Seche. Lecumnia. The name is it's a Latin name, and you look at it, you would never know that's how it's pronounced. But I did a Google search on the name and had the pronunciation and said Lecumnia Seche. So I put names together. I have several books. I also have. It's called. Wait, I'll hold it up. I'll show you this. I don't know if you can see it. It's
Yeah.
98, blue and gold. This is the University of California yearbook from 1898. So many of those aphorisms and quotations are from this book.
Okay.
Also, when Julian, or he's on the veranda at the beginning of the book, and the person reads about how from this college journal how I don't like co-eds because they get better grades than us or something. Comes and he says this Hopper fellow, but it was a direct quote from this book from the yearbook for the time. Radiovision was an earlier name for television. They're trying to figure out what to name, and that was one of the early ones were Radiovision and video scopes. And so I don't know. That part of the book was fun to write. It's actually pretty easy to do that, and they making up the names. And I have friends that like some of the like honeyberry. I have a friend who likes the honeyberry pudding. She goes, "What is it? I want some honeyberry pudding."
That's one of my notes that I took, and I'm thinking I was getting ready to ask you about that. So yeah, I want some as well.
Yeah.
What's the other ones? Oh, interesting. And this may be totally just off, but it's a flip on Star Wars because in the Star Wars, the Republic's the good guy and the Empire is the bad guy, and you have a kind of a flip on that in here.
Yeah, I think I just think what was interesting about this book is there is no autocratic leader. There is no leader, and of course, at
Yeah.
the end of the book, we find out how that is because it's supposed to be Queen Nuil. It was Queen Nuil
Right.
until the chasm happened. So I like the idea that there's the status imperium, then the judicial council, and it's full of highly educated people. Doctor this, doctor that. So it's just it's just a republic that went bad because of eugenics. All right, like I think I'll tell you what I think is unusual. We see the empire and or the republic, the empire, let's say in Star Wars, and we see the stormtroopers, and we see them, and the rebels are always we identify with the rebels, but in reality, in the world today, we are the empire,
Yes.
and other nations see us as the empire. We can't stand the idea that we are not the rebels. We can't stand that we're not the heroes like that. That we dominate these countries in this way. And so I don't think in the book the people from Metropolis, except for let's say Colonel Major Kunsa, he sees what the problem is. But the others, like Colonel Hastings or Colonel Watson, don't see that. They don't see. They see that this disease, speriosis, is dangerous, and all those people have to die. I think that's what Watkins says. They all have to die. And then what Hastings says, or Kunsa, remember, he says, this war has to end before somebody wins. And I think
love that quote.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of like that. It's just an unusual society. It's also not. I mean, it's authoritarian, but people do have free speech. They can do what they can with. It's limited, and you can hear there's a discussion. They said there's always a discussion of what can be in the newspapers and what's on the radio and whatever. People can protest. They just can't. What's on a war footing? Because remember World War I.
Yep.
They had the what the Sedition Act, if you and I are sitting at a coffee shop and we both say this war is stupid, we should not be in it, it's horrible, and government people or anybody overhears us, we go to jail for 10 years. In America, there was no more free speech about the war, none. So in that sense, you can hear how even a democratic Republican society can take a dark turn. And without people really recognizing it, because it seems logical. Of course, we have to win the war. We can't subvert our war effort.
Right. And it's motivated by fear. Fear is the great
Right.
motivator. And if you dehumanize your opponents, then it's so much easier to kill and hate them.
Right. That discussion between Julian and his sister Agnes. Right. But you think that obviously the council doesn't kill children. She says that. So why do you want them to win? They want to kill us all. So people adopt viewpoints that are given to them, and again, remember, the eugenics, the Great Separation happens in the book 100 years earlier. The war's been going on for 60 years, so for some people they're just used to it. Like during the Vietnam War, a lot of people are like, well, of course we have to win. When Michener did his book Kent State, interviewed people after the shooting, the vast majority thought that the students were in the wrong. A couple parents telling their kids, "Wow, the kids, Mom, I was there." Like, yeah, if you didn't listen to the guard, you should have been shot too. So we can't figure out how this can happen. It's because you just become used to the philosophical status quo.
Yeah.
And if you're taught that spiriosis is real and spiriosis does lead to a degenerate society, then it makes sense that those people are bad and they have to die. Or we're going to die. It's us or them. Fear, exactly what you said. It's fear.
Yeah. Don't touch them as you're rounding them up to kill them. Don't touch them because it's contagious.
Yeah.
Oh, is there a chance that there'd be a sequel coming?
Yeah, it's 250 pages in it already. It's called Undercity, and it opens up with Marco on that skiff with Mirez, who we saw. And then there was an older man and a young girl when they came up on the beach with Marco, and her name is Pyrenees, and his name is Geismar, and they go into the city, which is on fire. Well, I shouldn't say too much, but anyway, so the structure of the book is totally different. We see Marco's travel through the city and down into the Undercity and wherever they're going. They're in the underground river right now where I'm writing, but what makes the book different is there are going to be 20, 25, maybe 30 vignettes from other people, other stories. For example, there's one called The Bookseller. There's one which has 4 parts. The Bookseller has 2 parts, meaning you'll see one part in the narrative, then later on the second part will show up. There's a gypsy. I have 4 stories of the gypsy. There's going to be at least a 5th. There's a policeman. There's 3 of the policemen. There's a doctor. There's the mayor of the Undercity. And then I mentioned in the Undercity, Casper and Pollux asked Julian, have you ever read Frailing Vilpike's Eros and the Owl? I had these vignettes that I'd written 13 years ago, and I looked at them a couple of weeks ago and I go, oh, yes. They were called The Immortals, and I realized, oh, no. They are going to be Frailing Vilpike's novel Eros and the Owl. So we're going to see maybe 5 or 6 of them. They're just about a page each. Yeah. And they take place on an estate in the 3rd millennium when almost everything has died out on Earth. So the book is really different. Marco will come in and out, and you also will know way more about the Republic and the Undercity and what the society is really like. Remember, one of the regents, Rosario, told Julian, "You're only seeing a very small part of this, so you'll see a lot more." Oh yeah, one of the vignettes is published now in a little short story journal called the story is called "From the Journal of Dr. Edward Charavari," and it's about a student he had at one of the colleges named Gailey Ames, who is a clear sociopath who, after he leaves college, works his way up through the Chamberlains and gets an assignment in the Eastern provinces. And he is sort of a model in a sense of after Reinhard Heydrich. He is responsible for the death of thousands of people. Yeah. And near the end of this story, it's only 20 pages. Dr. Charbari sees him in a cafe, and they hadn't seen each other in years, and Charbari knows what Gailey Ames has done out in the provinces, but they have a little exchange sitting at a table, and Gailey Ames tries to make the argument for what he calls the logic of eugenics. So it's actually it's an interesting story. If we can figure out how to have an exchange of info, I could send it to you. I have a little PDF of it. It's really interesting because it tells you more of what's going on in the war.
I would love that. After we get done, we'll stop recording and we'll do that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Wow, so much fun. You know what it reminds me of? Your structure of this new one sounds like John Dos Passos 1919 with all little vignettes everywhere.
Kind of, but even more direct. I got the idea from Roberto Bolaño's The Savage Detectives.
Oh.
Where it opens up with a single. Have you read that? Do you know?
I have not, but I've heard about it, and I understand it's quite good.
Yeah. So it has a teenage narrative at the beginning, and then he shows up in the last part. But the middle part is like, I think there are 41 or 42 like journal entries or vignettes, stories that all these other people are telling, and that's how I got the idea. So rather than have one single narrative like Julian telling the whole story of Metropolis, there is Marco and Marco's story, but there are all these other voices, a little constellation of voices telling the stories, and their stories are short, but as again I say for the Gypsy, there are multiple versions of them.
But this is like a mosaic, and each piece puts together a larger picture.
Yes. You'll see way more of everything than you do in Metropolis, and you'll realize when you see Undercity, wow, Julian didn't see hardly anything. He doesn't really know what's going on at all.
Okay.
So I like that. Anyway.
Great. Well, I think I've run through most of my questions except for the 18 other pages of stuff that I could be asking you about.
Yeah.
But I think we'll wind it up with a thought about how much you enjoy writing.
I think it was another writer, I can't remember her name. She said she enjoys having written. Okay. I would say in general, Metropolis was fun to write, and Undercity is fairly fun to write, although I cut my finger really badly in March. I'm able to type that well.
Oh, that's no fun.
So I didn't do much work on it in the last, say, 6 months or so. But in general, I stick to that. It was Gloria Steinem said that. I enjoy having written. I like reading what I've written. Metropolis is fun because it was easy to write. Okay, and tell the story. And I like to be able to just write a bunch of things. I can't say I'm like super passionate about writing. Like, a lot of writers just love writing all the time. I don't really, but I like what I write, and I like how I write.
Yeah.
I guess I like, so for Metropolis, what I like best about the book is the language, how I say things, all these turns of phrases. I find them endlessly fascinating because I don't remember, right? Half of them I don't remember even writing. I'll see a whole page, I don't remember where that came from. I just made it up.
Okay.
So anyway, that's what I like. That's what I'd say. Yep.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us today and for a really intriguing book, like no other I think I've ever read. And its title actually is Metropolis, not Millennium. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
And you can see a lot of it on the website.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Metropolisthebook.com, pictures and a sort of have you seen the website?
I have not seen the website.
Oh, you have to go see it. You have to go see it. You don't really like it.
Okay.
It's a slideshow of the whole book at one point with clips from my writing. Pictures of it.
I will definitely do that. See how it fits with my imagination. One other thing I do want to mention, though, in researching online, I found this fabulous recipe for a drink that you put out as a silent movie short. As Satan's Whiskers, and highly recommend you look it up because you had so much fun doing that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Really great interview. It's just really interesting. It's fascinating. Yeah, you knew the book really, really well.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. Right.